So I watched another Japanese film. Sometimes I don't go that random, and I just watch. Um, yeah, I guess I just watch movies for a single country. I mean, well, technically, yesterday I watched one from China, so I guess that's just about neighbor. Anyway, yeah. As it happens, though, this one isn't really that much better or that much worse from the one I watched yesterday. It's just slightly different, but it's still around as weak in my opinion. So it's called, and the title is also quite weak. It's called You, comma, I Love, and obviously it's a reference to the protagonist, you. But seriously, um, I cannot believe this can be considered to be a romantic story. It's not really romantic at all in my opinion. Even until the end. I mean, it's a bit forced, just a bit, ever so slightly. Yeah. Uh, and it does have rom-com elements, but very slight still. It's not really a proper rom-com, and it's not really a proper comedy either. This is when movies fail, when there's not a single genre that's really strong, even if there are other genres. Like, I keep going back to it, but it's a sort of relevant as a sort of benchmark, I suppose. Um, Spellbound had loads of genres as well, and it really didn't suffer because of that. And in a similar fashion, I mean, this one didn't have horror, obviously, but in a similar fashion, this at least had well, what's supposed to have been romance and some comedy, but none of them were really strong at all. And you know, they weren't strong because of the story. Really, I think, in my opinion, they just weren't. Seriously, what kind of story is that? You cannot just build a romantic movie based on that. I mean, even what was that I watched recently? Yeah, they they were next to each other in the playlist actually, and yeah, our meal tomorrow or something. But even beginning from a rucksack, rucksack, a sack. Yeah, it might not be the most comedic thing, but it's more comedic than this, honestly. Like, seriously, what was this? So he seriously thought that he could win her heart by breaking her, right? By doing what her father thought would make her like people more, because apparently, supposedly, he thinks good people are bad, and vice versa. I mean, it makes no sense. No, what father? We've never seen her father. We've only seen. Uh, no, we have. I don't think we've seen any parents, have we? It's such a bizarre story, honestly, and everything that happens is just like one more bizarre thing over another. And I wish they just in movies like this somehow. Honestly, I just wish maybe they just focused on a single thing. So comedy, since it did have a comedic vibe, but not really very strong at all. With regards to the their faces on, uh, you know, when they depict them as children. That was sort of comedic, considering they just superimpose their faces, so it's a bit out of, uh, you know, children don't have adult faces, obviously, so a bit bizarre. But so that anyway, the point is that gave it a comedic vibe. If otherwise the story was otherwise, maybe if it concentrated on the comedy, so if it had more comedy, but it really did try to go very much into the romantic direction, and it wasn't romantic because the premise wasn't. I mean, how is calling her Thresh supposed to be romantic? It makes no sense. I'm supposed to be happy that at the end they somehow looked at a meteor shower together and held hands after calling her Thresh throughout the movie. It makes no sense. And then they started dancing for some reason. Yeah, if it was a Bollywood film, it would make sense. That this is the thing. So everything was so out of context and random, and yet it's not comedic really, not comedic enough. I mean, Gintama was random, but it was comedic, right? No one can deny that. So it's not just the randomness. I mean, it was random, but it wasn't that random either, and it still had these tropes that are usually derived from either the romantic or the comedic genres, but it didn't really go, really well in either direction. And he obviously tried to go in the romantic direction, but how could it? I think it would have been better if it went in the comedic direction. It, it didn't begin from a romantic premise. It just didn't. I mean, yeah, it would have been more romantic if she ended up with the other guy. What's the point? It's not that I give a damn. Honestly, I do not do this thing where I obsess about who gets with who or such. I only care about the story and how much sense it makes, and well, how much it resonates with me ultimately, how it affects me. So um, our meal tomorrow affected me much more. I mean, I still didn't think it was the best thing ever, or as good as Spellbound, but it did affect me more. This though affected me so little, right? Uh, yeah, kind of like this that the Chinese film yesterday, Troublemakers. I mean, what's the point? So I mean, even Troublemakers, had a similar sort of problem. Instead, there, there wasn't. They didn't go in the direction of romance. They went into the direction of other sort of pathos, which still made no sense. They should have just concentrated on the comedy. And again, some movies are better as just a comedy, or at least have other elements, but mainly comedy. I think so. Going into the direction of comedy, so having like a resolution that is comedic, as opposed to just an attempt at pathos, or with this movie an attempt at romance when there really is very little. There's just very little. Like he literally just called her trash just 5 minutes ago. How am I supposed to feel? Like yay, they came together after they broke up already once. I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, yeah, he wasn't even being a tsundere. He was being an asshole, right? Uh, and he kept being like that until the very end, actually. And he still wanted her to pick up his bag or whatever. I mean, what? Just it just didn't resonate with me. Ultimately, that's it. What it did have positive, but by no means does this overcome the plot, because obviously the plot is thinking. I think the most crucial. Really, you could have the most brilliant cinematography, the most brilliant views, um, I guess the most photogenic characters, but you really cannot replace a story. If it makes no sense, it just makes no sense, no matter what, no matter what other elements. So in this case, though, what was positive, yes, was the cinematography at the end, especially. That was brilliant. I mean, obviously they used CGI with regards to the meteor shower, I'm assuming, so I'm not necessarily counting that. I don't think that was a realistic one. I'd be surprised if it was, at least. But yeah, that and the OST. Yeah, the music honestly was Much better for the movie itself. I mean, it didn't really. For some reason, it reminded me of Death Note. I wonder whether this the same musician wrote it. But yeah, the music was definitely better than the plot really deserved. But music on its own doesn't just magically transform and better as a movie. It just doesn't. So unfortunately, it's still mediocre at best. I mean, not absolutely awful, right? So awful that I was totally, but not very different from, let's say, the apartment I also watched recently. I mean, I don't know why people think that's a great romance either. I mean, it is obviously an attempt at romance, but it's not how one makes a romantic movie, in my opinion. But there was so much strange stuff happening there. Uh, I mean, obviously they're not exactly comparable. I mean, obviously the apartment is a relic of its time mainly. This was done. Wow, yeah, this was done about 60 years later. Nearly, but it's still not how romance is ideally made. Really depicted on film, right? And then, yeah, as I said, in direct comparison with another Japanese movie, um, Our Meal Tomorrow was far better with regards to the romance itself. Obviously, it also had pathos and it went into that direction, but it didn't. Unlike unlike Troublemakers, it didn't feel like it was there for no reason, just thrown in for the heck of it. Totally felt like that there, and I mean it fitted with the romance at least. It still wasn't the best thing ever, but it's still much better than this romantic attempt was at least, or the apartments in my opinion. I mean the apartment has a similar sort of thing where there is an attempt at comedy, but they don't go too much into comedy, and then they end up attempting romance as well. But they don't, in my opinion, succeed very much either. But somehow they think they do, and apparently the average viewer thinks so as well, based on the average rating. So I might be in the minority in regards to the apartment. I don't know about this, but this just it's one of those things, when the focus on a single genre, in my opinion at least, it would have been better than trying to mix and match sort of. It would have been better if there were more comedic moments even until the end with this movie. Unfortunately, in the end, this is what happens though. The title was cheesy and the movie turned out to be similarly cheesy. Um, it wouldn't have been if it just focused on the comedy, but it didn't. And yet, we're supposed to believe that they got a chance at a real relationship when he treats her so badly. It just it just doesn't resonate whatsoever, in my opinion. And I'd be surprised if anyone thinks this is some sort of ideal cookbook for relationships. I'd be disappointed if anyone thinks that it's just not. I mean, it's ridiculous, really. I mean, she looked so afraid. I mean, she really did depict fear. And how could you be so afraid in a relationship? No wonder she wanted to not remain with him anymore, and then somehow she did accept at the end. It's so bizarre. And there was supposed to be some sort of thing where they finally find the childhood treasure. Whoa. Well, that saves the film then. The childhood treasure of a bird toy. Yeah, I don't think it does. I mean, I don't mind just such things, really, but it doesn't save the film by itself, obviously. Um, birds or otherwise.